Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's American Association of Industry Veterinarians webinar. My name is Mia Carey, and as our president-elect, I am very happy to serve as your host for the evening, and I'm looking forward to a fun evening with our presenter, Stacy Purcell. So this webinar is being recorded, so for those that wanted to join us this evening but they have a conflict, we'll be able to share the link to the recording. So we are very happy to have Stacy with us tonight as our presenter. She will be sharing a 6-step blueprint for maximizing your earning potential. Welcome, Stacy. We're so glad to have you with us this evening.
Well, thank you, Mia. I appreciate that. Welcome, everyone. I'm glad to be here. So as Mia mentioned, the topic of our webinar this evening involves maximizing your earning potential. And people often view this topic in terms of their compensation. They'll ask questions such as, how much compensation can I expect if I have this job title or if I am in this specific position? And I believe that this is the wrong approach to take with compensation. And that's because while there is a pay range associated with a certain job title, that doesn't necessarily represent the most of what you can earn. Instead, I've seen people take a proactive role in determining for themselves how much they can earn in compensation. In other words, they've maximized their earning potential. So my goal with today's presentation is to empower you with the information, knowledge, and motivation to ensure that you can earn as much as you possibly can, not just today, but also in the future as you grow your career. As you can see by the title of the webinar, there are 6 steps in this blueprint. Those 6 steps are divided into 2 categories: increasing your earning potential with your current employer, or increasing your earning potential by taking a position with a new employer. The first category is composed of 3 steps. And step 1 is maximizing your value as an employee. Step 2 is becoming noticed within the industry. And step 3 is negotiating a pay raise with your current employer. And sometimes people will put too much emphasis on increasing their compensation by simply changing jobs. And that is just one part of the equation. Increasing your earning potential with your current employer is just as important as increasing it with a new employer. And as you'll see, by maximizing your earning potential with your current employer, you're actually increasing your potential with a future employer at the same time. So that is the first step in our 6-step blueprint: increasing your value with your current employer. Organizations want employees that will do one of 2 things, or both of these things. Number 1, make them money, or 2, save them money. In order to maximize your earning potential with your current employer, you must maximize your value as an employee. And there is a direct correlation between these 2 things: the value that you provide to your current employer and your earning potential within the organization. And 2 main ways to increase your value is to make the company money and/or save the company money. And before we continue, we have a quick poll question that we would like for you to answer. Mia?
Okay, Stacy, let me bring that up for the group. All right, if everybody would like to just take a moment to complete the poll that we have. We'll leave it open just for another moment here, Stacy. And while folks are filling out the poll, I wanted to also let you guys know that James Freeman is with us also this evening. He's one of our AAIV past presidents, and he is behind the scenes making sure our technology runs smoothly. So thank you, James, for being here with us as well. Okay, I think I'll go ahead and close the poll. And we should be able to see the results if you'd like to speak to them, Stacy.
Okay, and let's see, Mia, I'm seeing my slides here. I'm not seeing the results to the questions.
Let's see. Well, it looks like 50% responded, no, but I've come close, and 50% responded, no, I haven't come close.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone that participated in the polls. It sounds like it's about 50 and 50-50. All right. Well, there are 4 ways that you can increase your value with your current employer and, by extension, increase your earning potential. And the first way is to acquire new knowledge. You should seek to learn as much as you can about your current position and your profession. You can read blogs, books, watch webinars, listen to podcasts, and participate in classes and continuing education. The more that you learn, the more valuable that you become. If your employer does not provide opportunities for you to acquire more knowledge, then you should make an effort on your own to invest in yourself and in your career. And even if your employer does provide some opportunities for you to continue to grow and learn and continue your education, you should also supplement what they provide with additional training. The second thing that you can do to maximize your value with your current employer and increase your earning potential is to acquire new skills. There are many professional and industry-related certifications that you can obtain. These certifications not only make you more valuable to your current employer, but they also look good on your resume, and they'll make you more attractive to potential future employers. You might ask yourself, what kinds of certifications should I get? And that will largely depend on your current position and the plans that you have for your career growth. But you might even consider going back to school and pursuing an advanced degree like an MBA, for example. The next thing that you can do to stay current is to keep on top of industry trends. And by keeping on top of industry trends, that will help you maximize your earning potential. Trends change on an almost daily basis, which makes it difficult to be completely on top of them. And that's why it's important to make this a continual point of emphasis. Organizations of all types and sizes need employees who stay current with trends. Without these employees, they're not able to compete as well with other companies in their space, and as a result, they fall behind and they lose market share. And you can see why this is an opportunity to provide value. The fourth thing that you can do to maximize your value with your current employer is to ask for more responsibility. This is one of the most effective ways to increase your value as an employee. It's proactive, and it illustrates to your supervisor that you're willing to do what it takes. And some people don't get very excited about this. They think, well, why should I take on more responsibility if I'm not getting paid more money? But you must provide more value before pursuing more compensation. In other words, you can't maximize your earning potential without first maximizing your value to your employer. I think this philosophy is best summed up with a quote from motivational speaker Zig Ziglar. He said, "You can have everything in life that you want if you will first help just enough other people get what they want." Focus on what you can do for other people and focus on the value that you can provide for them. If you make that your focus and you're benefiting other people, then what you want will be taken care of. Part of doing this is making deposits in people's trust bank accounts. This is rooted in what is called the principle of reciprocity. And this principle means that when someone gives us something, we feel obligated to give something in return. And that's why you should focus on always giving to others instead of taking. And that way, when the time comes, you'll be able to make a withdrawal from their trust bank account. So now that you have started to increase your value at your current employer, what is the second step in our blueprint? And that is becoming noticed within the industry. There are 2 benefits of becoming noticed in the industry. Number 1, there is a benefit in it for your current employer. If you're raising awareness about yourself as an employee and you're positioning yourself as an expert in the industry, then it will cast your employer in a positive light. And this will brand your employer as an organization that has top-notch employees who are active within the industry. And secondly, there is a benefit in doing this for yourself, actually multiple benefits, because first, when you cast your employer in a positive light, this continues to increase your value as an employee, which is what we've already discussed, also increases your earning potential. And second, by increasing your visibility within the industry, you're also becoming noticed by potential future employers. And before these employers can recruit you and potentially hire you, they first have to notice you. So what are some things that you can do to become noticed within the industry? I have 6 activities that can help you. The first thing is to attend industry trade shows and to network. And I'm sure that many of you on this webinar are already doing this, but attending shows to gain knowledge is good, but when you attend these shows to also network, that's when you receive some real benefit. It's not just what you know, but it's who you know. In actuality, it's both who you know and what you know. So the second thing that you can do is to be active in industry associations, such as the AAIV. And once again, networking should be priorities when joining these associations. And you should have a plan for maximizing your membership. The AAIV and other organizations have numerous opportunities for networking, and the AVMA will be holding their conference here in another week and a half or so as well. And that will be another great opportunity to network with other colleagues. The third thing that you can do is to be a speaker for industry events. And this helps to position yourself as a leader in the field. And if you have extensive knowledge about a subject, then it makes sense to share that knowledge and raise your prominence. The fourth thing that you can do is to write papers and publish blog posts or articles. And this is another way that you can position yourself as an expert in the industry, because there are a number of sources within the industry where you can publish content. So it's wise to identify those opportunities, seek them out, and inquire about how you can contribute. The fifth thing is to produce content on social media. If you're already writing papers and publishing blog posts or articles, then it also makes sense to share these things on social media. It helps to brand you professionally in a positive way, and LinkedIn is a great place for this type of activity. The sixth thing that you can do is be willing to take risks. And I'd like to elaborate further on this last point. If you want to grow your career, then you must be willing to take risks. You cannot expect to achieve great rewards without taking some kind of risk. You have to be willing to put yourself out there, and that includes when it comes to getting noticed within the industry. You cannot let fear of failure get in the way of going after what you want. To some degree, fear of change and fear of the unknown are natural emotions. And I have an example that most of us can relate to. When you were a child, getting a shot may have been a frightening experience. If so, you will probably remember the drive to the doctor's office and the questions that were running through your mind, such as how big would the needle be, how many shots would you be getting, and how much would it hurt. But then once you reached the doctor's office and you received your shot, you discovered that thinking about the shot was worse than actually getting it. And it's the same thing with overcoming fear and taking a risk. Similar to getting a shot, all sorts of questions race through your mind about the situation. Also, like getting a shot, it often turns out that a lot of your fears are unfounded. And I have an acronym that I use for effectively dealing with this fear, and that acronym is FEAR, false evidence appearing real. So instead of looking at a situation with fear, look at it as an opportunity. It's an opportunity to do something great that could lead to potential career growth. And no one ever grew their career by leaps and bounds by playing it safe all of the time. By willing to go after opportunities when they present themselves, remember, it doesn't necessarily mean leaving your company for another position. It can also mean seizing opportunities with your current employer, including accepting a promotion or taking responsibility to head a new project. And unfortunately, there is a perceived comfort level involved in maintaining the status quo and not taking risks. But there are two problems with this. First, no one knows exactly how everything is going to turn out in a situation. It's just not possible. None of us have a crystal ball. But second, by being resistant to change and not taking risks, you're actually choosing not to grow. In today's job market, growth is not an option. Growth is mandatory for anyone looking to remain valuable and relevant to an employer, and that includes your current employer. Before you can seize an opportunity, you have to be willing to recognize it as such. And if you view opportunity as a risk, you're less likely to seize it. And I have many stories that illustrate what can happen when someone views an opportunity as a risk. For example, I was recently talking with a friend of mine following a trade show, and this friend formerly ran a large organization and has seen a great deal over the years. And during our conversation, he was telling me this story of someone in our industry, and for the purposes of today's webinar, I'll refer to that person as Joe. According to my friend, Joe has been in the same function for his entire career, doing mostly the same thing year after year after year. And Joe was once given the opportunity to learn another area of the business, but he turned down the opportunity, which he now regrets. Now Joe is stuck in the same role and the same function in his organization's business, and as a result, he feels pigeonholed. But not only that, Joe's company also doesn't view him as a risk taker or as someone who has experience in any other areas outside of his immediate department. So now that Joe is no longer a spring chicken in his profession, he expressed concern to my friend that companies are not willing to take a chance on him either. So Joe feels stuck to ride out his career in the same position with the same company, and that's not what he wants. In another situation, I personally called an individual about an opportunity with one of our firm's clients, an opportunity that I believe was better than the position that she currently held. And what I believed made it better was a couple things. First, it offered more compensation and greater responsibility. And not only that, it was also located geographically where she said she wanted to be, closer to her family. So the person in this role would report directly to the head of the business unit. And at her current position, there were 3 people between her and the business unit head. So following a face-to-face interview, which she had with my client was very interested and wanted to move her forward in the process. However, my candidate declined because she was intimidated by the role. She was afraid that she would not meet my client's expectations. The hiring manager, on the other hand, could not disagree more. The manager was very interested in this individual and was disappointed that she did not want to move forward. She was already on the short list of candidates and had an excellent chance of receiving an offer of employment. But she allowed fear to dictate her actions, or in this case, her inactions. The reality of the situation is that this individual is paid less than her peers, and she allowed herself to get stuck in her current position, which offers limited opportunity for growth. She did have another option, but she rejected it before she had a chance to see where it would go. In situations like these, I tell professionals that when it comes down to turning down opportunities, there is really nothing to turn down unless you literally have an offer in your hand. It costs you nothing to investigate opportunities, both inside your company and with other companies, because what if an opportunity is better than the one that you have? And you'll never know unless you actually have an offer in your hand to consider. And actually, if you don't have an offer in your hand, there's really not a decision that you have to make. You're really turning down the idea of an offer, not an offer itself. Now think about these examples for a moment in terms of your job and your career. Do you look for opportunities? And do you see opportunities, or do you see risk? Are you seeking to grow, or will you end up being like Joe? When it gets right down to it, potential is just potential. And the question eventually becomes, how do I realize that potential? In other words, how do I turn that potential into a reality? Before answering that question, we have another poll question. Mia?
Okay, let me bring that up for the group. Okay, and you should be able to see the questions. And Stacy, somebody's trying to reach you. Tell them to call back later. Just kidding.
Yes, my phone came back on.
No worries.
We're having
no
a bad
worries.
storm. We're having a bad storm here, and our power went off just before the webinar started, and the phones went out. And it's good to know the phone's back working again. I'm calling it on my cell phone.
Right. I'm glad you're safe. So that's what really matters. So again, the poll's open for those that want to access it. I see it's active. We have about 86% that have voted. And I wanted to let you know, while the rest of you continue the polling, if you do have questions during the webinar this evening, you can either use your chat function, or there's also a question mechanism where you can submit questions, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end of the session using the questions that you submit. So feel free to do so at any time. And I'll go ahead and close the poll and share the results. And Stacey, are you able to see the results that I have up on the screen?
No, I'm still seeing my screen here.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and read them off. So the question, as everyone knows, was, do you believe you're adequately compensated at your current employer? 71% answered for the most part, and 29% said, no, I feel undercompensated.
Okay, all right. Well, I appreciate that, Mia. All right, well, when it comes to your current employer, one of the ways to maximize your earning potential is to earn a raise. So those that don't feel that they're compensated properly, this is where you'll want to pay attention. So sometimes these raises are given before you ask, and sometimes you must ask for the raise. It's the latter scenario that I'd like to address now, and it's the third step in our blueprint, which is negotiating a raise with your current employer. It used to be that employees could at least count on a cost of living raise of between 2 and 3% a year, but that's often not the case today, or it hasn't been in recent years. But if you've increased your value and you believe that you deserve a raise that reflects that value, then you can try to negotiate a raise. There are 5 important points to remember about negotiating a raise. And the first point is to know why you deserve a raise. If you don't know why you deserve a raise, then how can you expect your supervisor to know why? What concrete contributions have you made to the company's bottom line? Make a list of these contributions. Make a list of these contributions, accomplishments, and achievements, because evidence of performance always makes pay negotiations go more smoothly. And while you do this, you should also be updating your resume with these achievements. That way, not only can you remind your current employer of what you've accomplished, but you can also be ready in case another opportunity presents itself. In addition to updating your resume, also update your LinkedIn profile with these accomplishments. Just a couple weeks ago, I submitted a candidate to one of our firm's clients, and one of the first things the hiring manager did was he went to LinkedIn to check out this individual's profile. But the problem was that their LinkedIn profile did not include their current employer. In other words, his LinkedIn profile was out of date because it was still showing his former employer. So even though this was a solid candidate with excellent credentials, the hiring manager rejected an interview with him because he said the candidate was not current with technology. And he said the very first thing he does when he gets a resume is he goes and looks at the person's LinkedIn profile. So when you submit your resume, assume that the hiring manager is going to look at your LinkedIn profile after they receive it, and they're probably looking at you on other social media too. They're probably checking out your Facebook profile if that's public, or if you're on Twitter. They're also just doing a general internet search too. They're looking to see if there's any online reviews about you. In another situation, I had a candidate who worked at the same company for 20 years. And the problem was that he had not updated his resume for the last 20 years. And he had a difficult time remembering everything that he'd accomplished over the past 20 years. And it took him about 2 weeks to update his resume. And even then, he said it was not as good as it would have been if he had consistently updated it along the way. So I recommend updating it every 6 months, or when you have a new accomplishment or a new project that you've been involved with, you'll want to add that, because if you wait 20 years, there's going to be a lot of things that you've worked on or accomplished in your career that you're not going to remember. So keep in mind, updating your LinkedIn profile, it's not just for a potential new employer, but it can also be for your current employer, because other people within your same organization are probably also looking at your LinkedIn profile. If you deserve a raise, the reasons that you deserve one should be on your resume, and they should also be included on your LinkedIn profile. So the second thing that you need to know about negotiating a raise with your current employer is to know what you should ask for. Conduct research regarding the common pay scales in the industry and for your specific position, both at the local level and at the national level. How much of a raise are you seeking? Have a percentage or a dollar amount in mind. And would you be willing to accept another form of compensation besides money? If so, what would you consider? There are different that you can use when conducting your research. There are the American Veterinary Medical Association website, there's payscale.com, and you can also talk to other people within your network who have the same level of responsibilities that you do. And the AAIV has also published a salary study in the past as well. So I would encourage you to look at these resources, and you're also welcome to contact me regarding salary and compensation questions, because I have a very large database of people in the industry and different job functions at just about every company within the industry, and I know what their salaries are, so that would allow me to tell you how competitive your salary is within the market and compared to your colleagues. And I get those kind of calls all the time, and I don't mind, where people will call and say, you know, this is my title, this is what I'm making, how does that compare with what my peers are making? So I can give you an idea if that's competitive or not. The third thing is to know when to ask for a raise. Are you coming off a string of months where you have wowed everyone with the work that you did? This would be the best time to negotiate a pay raise. However, it's not just you that you have to worry about. What is the company's financial footing at the moment? Is it strong and solid, or is it shaky? The answer may have to do more with what happens with the company than your actual performance, or if the economy is good or not. The fourth thing to consider is to know what would be acceptable to you. Maybe the company just can't swing the raise that you're seeking at the moment, but what else would you consider to be attractive in the way of increased compensation? Would you consider a more flexible schedule, the ability to work from home every now and then, training opportunities? These are all part of the negotiation process. And the fifth thing is to know what to say and how to say it. Practice what you're going to say in front of a mirror, or if possible, in front of another person. And prepare the content of your side of the conversation as well, in the style and manner in which you say it. And you can practice role-playing with a member of your family or a neighbor or a friend. And that brings us to another poll question.
Okay, thank you, Stacy. Let me get that up for you. Okay. And everybody should be seeing the poll question. Have you ever negotiated a pay raise with an employer? I can see some of our group is starting to answer. I thought that was a great piece of advice, Stacy, about keeping the LinkedIn profile and resume updated. I think about doing it, you know, when I have a little milestone that I want to add, and I don't make it a priority, but I think it's really smart to do so. It's great advice.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to someone else the other day, and he had made a change to another company a year ago, and he still had the old company on his LinkedIn profile. I said, you need to update your LinkedIn profile. He goes, I just don't think about that. But, you know, people are looking at that. Social media has become so important in today's marketplace. So if you're not, if people aren't very knowledgeable about it, it would be, you know, a great time to learn.
Yep, absolutely. So the majority have voted. If you'd like to vote, now's the time. I'm going to close it in just a moment. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and close the poll, and I will post the results. And Stacy, for your benefit, it's a little bit even. We have 17% that say they've never even considered it, 33% no, but I've thought about it, 17% yes, but without success, and 33% yes, and I was successful.
All right. Well, that is all over the So, all right, well, I appreciate that, Mia. Well, it's at this point in the presentation where we're going to move from the first category of increasing your earning potential with your current employer to the second category of increasing your earning potential with a new employer. And the second category is also divided into 3 steps. Step 4 is interviewing with a potential employer. Step 5 is negotiating salary and compensation. And step 6 is leveraging the resources of a search consultant or recruiter. And I use those words interchangeably. So in today's job market, companies no longer frown upon candidates who have changed jobs every 3 to 5 years. They used to term these candidates as job hoppers. And now, believe it or not, they actually view them in a positive light. It's the candidates who have worked for the same company for extended periods of time that sometimes employers view with doubt. And I'll mention this, that the average person in America stays in a job for 3 to 5 years. And the millennial generation, the statistics I read on how long they stay in a job is 18 months to 2 years. In fact, I recently worked with an individual who was at the same company for 17 years. And I had a difficult time placing him because the hiring managers that I was presenting him to were concerned that he would have a hard time adjusting to a new culture. Since he had worked for the same organization his entire career, these employers believed that he had only seen things done one way and didn't have the advantage of seeing how other companies operate and do things. And I think that was something for which he was not prepared, and more likely that would be the case for anybody who had worked at the same company for 17 years. So consider this fact. People who change jobs every 3 to 5 years earn more in compensation and benefits than people who stay at the same employer for 10, 15, or 20 years. And how can this be the case? Well, it's a matter of motivation. In order to hire the candidates they want for their open positions, companies must make those positions attractive. And this includes offering a salary and compensation package that is more than what the candidate is earning at their current employer, and in some cases it can be significantly more. Not only that, but let's say that someone changes jobs on a consistent basis about every 3 to 5 years in search of better opportunities and career advancement. Every time they move, they receive a salary increase from their new employer. That has a cumulative effect throughout their career. And what does that mean? It means that the job hopper could be earning $20,000 to $30,000 more per year in salary after making 4 job changes in 20 years than someone who has worked at the same company for those 20 years. And I have seen that because I remember I was interviewing some sales reps in the field, and I remember a lady told me, she said, I am the highest paid person in my company. And I said, well, how do you know that? And she said, because I've been here for, but I had just interviewed a number of her peers for the same position, and all of the people that had recently joined the company were making significantly more than she was, and she was not even aware of that. So consequently, people who actively strive to enhance the scope of their career by seeking new opportunities for advancement every 3 to 5 years earn more in salary than those people who do not. So in terms of maximizing their earning potential, which is the title of today's presentation, that is a shrewd move on their part. So let's say that you've completed the first step in this blueprint. You've increased your value with your current employer, you've become noticed within the industry, and you've attempted to negotiate a raise with your current employer. But your employer did not give you the raise that you were seeking, so obviously your earning potential will not be realized, at least not for now, or not as quickly as you were hoping. So in order to realize your earning potential, seeking an employment opportunity with a new employer could be in order for you. And that brings us to the 4th step in the blueprint, and that's interviewing with a potential employer. So before we go forward, I would like to make an important point. The best time to look for a new job opportunity is when you've already got one. It's not when you don't have a job and you need one. And I'd like to reference the book, Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty by best-selling author Harvey Mackay. And this is a book that every professional needs to read. I have a copy on my desk. By most estimates, you can only live 3 days without water. So in a literal sense, you would have to dig your well before you were thirsty, or you run the risk of death. And I know that's an extreme example, but in the figurative sense, when you are unemployed, you need a job right now. However, just like digging a well, it takes time to find a better job opportunity, and a job is not going to suddenly fall into your lap just because you're suddenly employed. The worst time to look for a new position is when you find yourself unemployed. And the best time is when you have a good position, because then you can strategically advance your career forward. You have more leverage in that situation, and you're operating from a position of strength and not of weakness. Because when you have a good job, you have the luxury of turning down opportunities that are not better. But when you don't have a job, you don't have that same luxury. So let me illustrate a point with a story that happened recently. I received a phone call from an individual who had been unemployed for about 9 months. And during the course of our conversation, I wondered why he had not contacted me 9 months earlier. He had sent out numerous resumes to many different companies without success. And unfortunately, he was now expecting me to help him find a position, a task made all the more difficult because he had blasted out his resume to many employers with no results. If he had called me 9 months earlier, or better yet, before he was unemployed, I would have been in a much better position to help him. In another situation, I contacted an individual about a person for which I believed she would be a great fit, and she did not respond back to me right away. In fact, it took her about 3 weeks to get back with me. When she finally did respond, she mentioned that her current job would be ending at the conclusion of the month due to a realignment with her employer. She did not have that information 3 weeks prior when I reached out to her. But as you can imagine now, she was interested in the position that I had contacted her about, but the problem was that the position had just been filled. Then back in 2012, I reached out to a professional to see if they would be open to looking at some other opportunities that I had at that time, and he responded to my inquiry, but he responded 4 years later. He responded this year in 2016. Why respond now instead of 4 years? And it was because he found out that he was losing his position with his current employer, and now he needed someone to help him find a new position. But in that situation, he was moving from a position of weakness and not a position of strength. So the moral of these stories, it's better to take a more proactive, strategic approach to advancing your career forward. In other words, digging your well before you're thirsty. So interviewing with a potential employer is another way to increase your earning potential. When you are interviewing with potential employers, it's important to approach the interview process in the correct fashion. And that approach should include 3 things. The first thing is how your skills and experience line up with the job responsibilities. What do you bring to the table in terms of skills and abilities? Do they fit into the position that the company is trying to fill? Look for opportunities to point out how these things mesh together, and that will increase your chances of being seen as a fit by the employer for the position. The second thing is the goals for growth that the company is trying to achieve. When it comes time for you to ask questions, be sure to ask about the organization's goals for growth. Ask how long, or ask how you would be able to contribute to reaching those goals if you were hired. And once you start discussing the future of the company, it will be easier for hiring managers to see you as part of that future. The third thing to keep in mind is the value that you bring to the organization. Focus on what you can do for the organization in all areas. Talk about your value and how that value can help the organization. Make the conversation about them achieving their goals and not about you achieving your goals or getting the job. As you can see, it always comes back to value, the value that you can bring to the organization. During an interview, focus on the needs of the company and how you can help solve their problems, whether that's your current employer or a future employer. But the job offer hinges on how well you interview and your negotiation skills. And that's why when someone asks me, what does this position pay? My response is often, well, it depends on how well you interview. Before we discuss negotiating salary and compensation, we have another poll question.
Okay, Stacy, great. Let me get that up for you. Okay, everybody should be viewing the poll. How much would you expect your compensation to increase if you changed employers? Okay, we've got the majority that have already voted, but we'll give it just another moment in case there's anyone else that would like to vote. And okay, looking good. I'm going to go ahead, Stacy, and close the poll, and I will share the results. And Stacy, for your benefit, the answer for how much would you expect your compensation to increase if you changed employers, at least 5% was selected by 25%, 30% of our group said at least 7%, and 63% said at least 10%.
All right, well, thank you, Mia. And that's a question I ask people too when I'm interviewing them. I'll say, how much do you expect your compensation to increase? The number that I hear most often is 10%. However, I see people make changes for all different percentages. I've even, believe it or not, seen people make a change for less than their current salary because it was a better opportunity or in a better location or an employer that they perceived was better. But the most common answer, like I said, I hear is the 10%. And some people get that, some people get more. Not everybody gets 10%. Sometimes people will make a change for 3 or 5 or 7%. Well, that brings us to the 5th step of our blueprint, and that involves negotiating salary and compensation once a new organization has made an offer of employment. And if you're working with a recruiter, the recruiter's job is to help you negotiate a fair package. But before we discuss that, I have 3 important tips for negotiating salary and compensation. And the first tip is don't emphasize money too much. If a company is going to offer you a position, then the subject of money will be brought up eventually. The purpose of going to an interview is to get a job offer, and you don't want to jeopardize your chances of getting the offer. After all, like I said before, you don't have to make a decision until you have an offer in hand. If you focus too much on the money before the offer is even made, then you might not receive the offer at all. And that's because company officials don't want to hire individuals whose top priority is compensation. It's kind of like dating. When you go on a first date with someone, you certainly don't want to receive a marriage proposal. And that holds true for an interview. So don't act as though you want to talk about money too quickly, because if they believe that money is your primary motivation, they'll also believe that you might accept a counteroffer from your current employer, or that you'll leave as soon as another company offers you more money. So the second thing to remember about negotiating salary and compensation is don't bring up money first. Wait for the employer to bring up compensation. Your job at the interview is to sell yourself as being both qualified and interested in the opportunities that the employer will want to make you a job offer. If the employer is interested in you, they will talk about compensation at some point. I can almost guarantee that. And when the employer brings up money, the best way to answer this question is to say something like this. Obviously, I'm looking for your best offer, but career challenge and opportunity will weigh heavily on my decision. You have a range in mind that you're planning to pay the person in this position. I would like to be somewhere within your range based on my qualifications and what I bring to the table. And this is not sidestepping the employer's question. You're answering the question without giving a specific number. And it's a good idea because if you give a number that's too low, you could risk leaving money on the table. If you provide a number that's too high, you'll price yourself out of the range. So ask the employer to make their best offer so that you have something to consider. However, if a potential employer does ask for a specific number in terms of your compensation, you'll want to be upfront and honest and give them accurate numbers. If you give an incorrect number and say that your compensation is $10,000 more than it actually is, that might be a problem if the employer attempts to verify it, which many employers do that. They'll ask for W-2s or pay stubs. So be open and honest when you answer that question, and if you're working through a recruiter, then they'll be able to help you as well with your compensation. Think of it a little bit like a real estate agent. If you're buying or selling a house, that real estate agent is going to help both parties come to the table with a number that both people are comfortable with, and that's what a recruiter's job is. But remember, you will ultimately be compensated for the value that you bring to the organization. The third thing is if you are negotiating your own compensation, you could leave money on the table. Like I said before, if you're working with the recruiter, they'll make sure that you don't leave money on the table because they're going to see all the cards on the table like a poker game, and they're going to make sure that you receive the best offer, because the recruiter is going to know what your expectations are and what the employer's range is, and they'll be able to negotiate a fair and compensation package. And it is the recruiter's best interest that both parties are satisfied, and the recruiter should ask their client to make their very best offer and should even be able to accept it on your behalf if they already know what you need. It's, like I said before, it's like buying a house. So if you negotiated the compensation phase of the offer stage well, then you've not only landed a new job with all of the challenges and growth opportunities that go along with it, but you've also maximized your earning potential. Now, there is something else that could happen at this stage in the process, and that something is a counteroffer. In a counteroffer situation, your current employer makes an offer to you in an attempt to retain you. And that leads us to our fifth and final poll question in tonight's presentation.
Okay, Stacy, thank you. Let me get that out there for you. Okay, and everybody should be viewing the poll. Do you believe accepting a counteroffer is a good way to maximize your earning potential? This will be interesting to see this result. All right, we've got 100% already in. So let me go ahead and close the poll and share the results. And Stacy, for your benefit, the group answered 78% said yes in certain situations. 22% said no, counteroffers are risky.
All right, so 78% yes and 22% no, and I'm gonna address that here in just a minute. But first, I was going to say that there is an X factor involved with this entire process, and that X factor is the role that a recruiter can play in your career, and that is the sixth and final step in our blueprint this evening: how to leverage the resources of a recruiter if you're working with one. According to several studies and statistics, about 64% of executive level positions are filled through recruiters. And this makes sense because the more important a job opening is to a company, or the more senior the job opening is, the more it wants to ensure that the opening is filled with the best and most qualified candidates possible. And that's certainly the case with executive level positions. So there are 5 ways that a recruiter can help you during this process if you're working with one. Number 1, recruiters have direct access to the hiring manager and the company where you want to work. Number 2, recruiters have a relationship. They have a relationship with the hiring manager, and you may not have that direct relationship. Thirdly, they possess inside information about the job opening that's not listed in the online job posting. And number 4, a recruiter's endorsement of you means that you're not tooting your own horn. And since the recruiter's reputation is on the line when they're tooting someone's horn, the hiring manager is often going to listen to the search consultant if they've enlisted their services. So it just brings more credibility when the search consultant introduces you versus tooting your own horn. And also, recruiters know how to navigate the human resources department better than most candidates, who can often get stuck in a job search black hole. And then also, recruiters can help in a counteroffer situation. The problem with accepting a counteroffer is that you'll be viewed as a flight risk by your company after you accept the offer. And in some cases, the employer is just trying to retain your services until they can find someone to replace you, because there's always going to be the concern that you are out interviewing with a competitor. And remember, the counteroffer was only made because you submitted your notice, and will you have to submit your notice every time you want more compensation or better working conditions? One would hope not, but the evidence on that shows otherwise. Not only that, but if you accept a counteroffer from your current employer, you're essentially breaking your word with the company that agreed to hire you. And when you do that, you're damaging your reputation within the industry, and company officials remember things of that nature, and you could damage your career by going back on your word of honor. It's situations like that that a recruiter can help guide you through, because they've seen what can happen in these situations. They can point you in the right direction and give you some guidance. So now that you know some of the benefits of working with a recruiter, how can you get on a recruiter's radar and get noticed? By the way, on counteroffers, I read here's the good news. The same things that you did to get noticed within the industry are the same things for getting noticed by the recruiter. And those include joining industry associations, writing articles for trade journals, and participating in social networking sites, especially business ones such as LinkedIn. And those are all things that we discussed earlier in the webinar. If you're not on LinkedIn, I would recommend that you join, because if you're a well-known entity, hiring managers and recruiters will seek you out, and one of the places that they do that is on LinkedIn. But if you're not getting calls from recruiters, don't just sit back and wait for one to contact you. You can seek them out. You'll want to look for recruiters that have a proven track record of success in your industry. In other words, if you're a veterinarian, you don't want to work with one that places lawyers or accountants. You'll want to work with one that has experience placing people in the same types of roles that you're looking for. And you can ask your colleagues and friends to provide referrals of recruiters that they've worked with in the past. According to Hunt Scanlon Media, search consultants are part of a $10 billion a year executive recruiting industry. And as I just mentioned, 64% of all executive level roles are filled through recruiters. And those statistics alone show why it's important to have a relationship with search professionals, because it is truly one of the most important and rewarding relationships you can have in your career. The key is to be proactive and don't wait until you need a recruiter before you reach out to one and build a relationship. Of course, like I said before, always focus on the value that you can provide to other people, and that includes working with search consultants, because sometimes a recruiter might reach out to you about a job that you're not interested in, or one for which you may not be a good fit. And if that's the case, you can just politely let them know that you're not interested, but provide them with names of colleagues or of other people that you know are a good fit and might be open to opportunities, because the recruiter will remember that you have provided that referral, and they'll keep you in mind and reach out to you in the future. And this also represents the principle of reciprocity. Once again, when someone gives us something, we feel compelled to give them something back in return. So if you give a referral to a recruiter, that recruiter will feel compelled and obligated to give you something in return at a later date. And that could take the form of a potential new career opportunity, one that could be a better fit for you. So providing a referral is an example of the value that you can provide in this situation. And remember the quote by Zig Ziglar from earlier in the webinar: you can have everything in life that you want if you will just help enough other people get what they want. Maximizing your earning potential is a never-ending process, and no matter where you are, you should be doing everything that you can to maximize your potential with your current employer, and also doing what you can to maximize it with future employers. Organizations want employees who provide value, and in the majority of cases, they will compensate the employees who provide that value the most. And that means you must be willing to take the steps necessary to increase the value that you are providing to your current employer. And the good news is that you can start taking some of these steps today. And you can follow this blueprint, grow your career, and move closer to realizing your full earning potential. I have worked with thousands of individuals in the animal health and veterinary industry over the last 19 years and helped hundreds of people make career transitions. If you have any questions about today's webinar or how you can maximize your earning potential, you are welcome to reach out to me, and my contact information is here on the screen, and want to thank everyone for attending this webinar, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you, Stacey, so much. What a great presentation. We've got a couple of housekeeping items to share with the group, and such as how to receive the CE certificate and some dates to share with the members. But before we do that, we do have a couple questions. I think we only have time for one or two. But Stacey, one question came in. The line went a little bit garbled right when you were talking about your perspectives on counter offer. So a question was if you could repeat your perspectives on the counter offer.
Okay, sure, I can definitely do that. And if anybody has any specific, if anybody wants to email me, I have, there's an article that was in the Employee, I think it's called the Employee Business Weekly magazine. It's a business magazine on counter offers. It talks about the statistics of people that accept counter offers. And if anybody wants to email me, I would be glad to send that out. But the statistics show that people that do take counter offers do not stay with their current employer. There's a very high percentage of people that take counter offers that are gone within 6 to 12 months of accepting a counter offer, because the first thing that goes through an employer's mind when somebody resigns is the manager is going, oh no, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to do this person's work, and they kind of panic, and they think, well, maybe I can offer them more money or something to keep them there. But the problem with that is usually whatever the reason was that the person resigned in the first place usually will crop up again 6 months later. And also the employer is thinking, well, this person's not loyal because they were just out interviewing with a competitor. And so it's almost like you become out of the inner circle. So now you're on the outside, and they're always going to view you with suspicion. I've personally worked with people over the years that have taken counter offers, and I don't think any of them have been glad that they did that, because almost all of them called me back within 18 months, some of them within 6 months, to tell me that they had regretted it. In fact, last year I had somebody that came back to me who had accepted a counter offer, and she said, my company promised me X, Y, and Z if I would stay, and then none of that ended up happening, so she regretted that she had stayed and not, in fact, she wanted to know if the position was still open, but I told her it had been filled months ago.
That's great advice, Stacey. One more question, and we had a couple others, but I'm going to pull this one out, and let's go with this. You had mentioned, Stacey, in your presentation, the recommendation to keep on top of industry trends. Can you give some examples of how to go about doing that?
So some of the ways to keep on top of industry trends is to read industry journals, publications, blogs, networking, continuing education, going to trade shows, seminars, social media. LinkedIn is a great way. LinkedIn is a great tool, not just for keeping your resume updated, but people post all kinds of news and articles and industry events. Some people I talk to, they say, well, I signed up for LinkedIn a year ago and I never look at it. But LinkedIn is kind of like the Facebook for professionals, and a lot of professionals go to LinkedIn every day, and there's articles. People post articles about things that are happening in the industry. When people or companies are doing mergers and acquisitions, because you'll see that posted on LinkedIn. So that's a great resource. But just keeping your head up. So many people keep their head down on their desk and what they're doing, and they're not even aware of what's going on outside of their current organization. They're not sure what's happening in the marketplace with other companies outside of their current employer. So it's just a matter of keeping your head up, staying tuned, keeping your ear to the ground, if you will, and your eyes open, and just networking and talking to people. You have friends or former colleagues maybe that have gone to other organizations. Just stay connected with those people so you know what's going on in the industry.
Excellent advice, Stacey. So we will conclude here. I'll give you the group a couple housekeeping bits of information, but first and foremost, thank you, Stacey, very much for your informative presentation. And also thank you to all of you that made time in your busy schedules to join us this evening and participate in the polls. You will, within about 24 hours, receive a link to a short SurveyMonkey evaluation. If you will take the time to complete that evaluation so that we can incorporate your thoughts into future programming, we would very much appreciate it. And after that survey has been submitted, you will receive your CE certificate for 1 hour of RACE CE. And that will be sent to you again within 24 hours. Thank you also to James as well for your behind-the-scenes technical support. And then lastly, I just wanted to let the group know about 2 upcoming events. At the AVMA convention happening next week, we do have an AAIV meeting and networking reception that will be on Sunday, August 7th at 5 p.m. local time, and that is being held at the Grand Hyatt San Antonio Travis D. So following Stacy's advice to network and to connect with colleagues and possibly future employers, I definitely hope that you join us. I think it'll be a lot of fun. Again, that's 5 o'clock on Sunday at the Grand Hyatt. And then also our next webinar will be Tuesday, October 4th at 7 p.m. with Dr. Mike Chaddick. And of course, we'll be sending out announcements on that in the near future. So that's it for us. Have a great evening, everyone, and I look forward to seeing some of you at our reception next week. Take care, everyone. Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you, Mia. Good night, everyone.